In 1971, America was at a crossroads. The civil rights movement was reshaping society, calling for economic justice. The Vietnam War had radicalized a generation, fueling distrust in government and corporate power. Activists like Ralph Nader exposed corporate negligence, and the environmental movement demanded accountability from industries long accustomed to polluting and poisoning our air and water without consequence. Labor unions made sure workers shared in post war prosperity. Now, you could easily argue that these forces collectively pushed America toward a fairer, more regulated system. But corporate America, according to Lewis Powell, was under attack. Now, Lewis Powell, a corporate lawyer and future Supreme Court justice, looked around at the current social structure and saw a crisis for big business. He feared a Marxist takeover of government, which would, in the long run, undercut American freedom and justice. In response to these concerns, he drafted a memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce urging corporate leaders to take an active role in their survival before it's too late. He urged businesses to start controlling the levers of power, shaping public discourse, influencing elections, and taking over the courts. This Powell Memo became the blueprint for corporate dominance. Now, Powell's most visible strategy was controlling the media. He recognized that the press, universities, and entertainment industries shaped public opinion. If corporations wanted to assert and maintain their dominance, they needed to infiltrate and steer these institutions toward pro-business narratives. But even more crucial than media control was capturing politicians in the judiciary. Powell urged businesses to fund lobbying efforts, shape legislation, and install judges who would consistently rule in favor of corporate interests. Over time, as we now see, his plan worked. Corporate-backed think tanks like the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute flooded public discourse with pro-business rhetoric. Fox News and right-wing radio became megaphones for deregulation and tax cuts. The rise of the religious right in the late 1970s was no accident. It was a coordinated effort to fuse capitalism with Christian values, reframing corporate greed as a moral imperative. The megachurches you see today, where the church leaders live shamelessly in large mansions and fly their private jets, are an outgrowth of this fusion of the corporate and religious mindset. Meanwhile, labor unions, once the main defender of workers and by extension defenders of American democracy, faced relentless attacks. Wages stagnated, workplace protections eroded, and real income for workers stopped rising even as productivity soared. The legal system followed suit. The Federalist Society became the gatekeeper for conservative judicial appointments, ensuring corporate-friendly rulings dominated the courts. Landmark cases like Citizens United gutted campaign finance laws, expanded corporate political influence, and stripped away worker protections. Powell's memo had warned that business was under attack. 50 years later, business was firmly in control. Today we see Powell's vision, fully realized in Project 2025, a radical plan from the Heritage Foundation to entrench corporate and religious conservatism in every corner of government. It seeks to dismantle regulatory agencies, privatize social services, and eliminate environmental protections. The presidency of Donald Trump accelerated this plan, stripping away safeguards and stacking key government positions with loyalists. Now, if Project 2025 succeeds, the government will no longer serve the people. It will serve the corporations. One could argue that this is already the case. Now, here's the irony. Powell warned that leftist propaganda had convinced Americans that big business controlled the country. At the time, this was an overstatement. But today, corporate interests dictate economic policy, fund elections, and shape public perception through a carefully constructed media empire. Powell's fears drove us to an increasingly dystopian reality, undercutting our precious personal freedoms, which is ultimately what he feared. Now, if you heard me talk recently about the Frankfurt School, well, the Frankfurt School figures into this because they warned that controlling culture and media would pacify the working class. Powell's memo, ironically, proved that theory correct. Corporate America took control of the narrative, shaping not only our economy, but our very understanding of democracy. So, what do? We take to the streets. We flood the phone lines of our political representatives. We vote. We write letters to the editor. We inject progressive ideas into social media. And maybe, just maybe, we run for office. Look, America has stumbled, but it's up to us. It's up to us to lift her up before corporate interests strangle her to death. Also, if you're curious, have a look at Powell's memo. Google the Powell Memo and you'll find dozens of copies online. Though it can be read in a few minutes, its implementation spanned decades. My name is Dan Schaefer, previous Democratic candidate who ran for the Missouri House of Representatives, District 97. Thank you for your time.